Someone once sold the Eiffel Tower, not as a joke. He sold it for scrap metal, like an old rusty car. This is like a guy walking up to you and offering to sell the Statue of Liberty for parts. It sounds completely insane, but this story is 100% true. To understand how this even happened, you have to go back to Paris in 1925. The Eiffel Tower wasn't the beloved treasure it is today. Not even close. It was built as a temporary building for a big World's Fair. Many people in Paris thought it was just a giant, ugly piece of metal. They actually called it a truly tragic street lamp and couldn't wait for it to be torn down. It was rusting away and cost a fortune to maintain. Now, let's meet our bad guy. His name was Victor Lustig. But he didn't act like a bad guy. He was smooth. He was charming. He was the kind of person you wanted to believe. He called himself Count Victor Lustig. He could speak 5 different languages perfectly. He could convince a dog to give up its favorite bone. He was an artist, and his art was telling masterful lies. Lustig knew a secret about people. He knew that if you promised them something they really, really wanted, a part of their brain just shuts down. They stop asking smart questions. So where did this crazy idea even come from? It started in a cafe. Lustig was just sitting there, reading a newspaper like any other person on a normal Tuesday. He saw a small, boring article. It said the city was having a hard time paying to paint and fix the Eiffel Tower. For anyone else, this was forgettable news. For Lustig, it was like a treasure map had just fallen into his lap. A few days later, he rented a room in a super fancy hotel. He sent official-looking letters to the 5 biggest scrap metal dealers in the city. The letters invited them to a top-secret meeting that could make them very rich. He explained that the government was facing a huge problem, a very secret problem. The Eiffel Tower, he whispered, was costing the city a fortune to maintain. The paint jobs, the repairs. It was a financial disaster hidden from the public. This was his story. He told them the city had made a secret decision. They were going to tear it down. Can you even imagine? He said the government wanted to sell the 7,000 tons of metal for scrap. Quietly. No fuss. The businessmen in the room were stunned. They looked at each other. Selling the Eiffel Tower? It was the most insane thing they had ever heard. But here was a government man with official-looking papers telling them it was true. Lustig then told them they were the most trusted scrap metal dealers in all of France. That's why they were chosen for this top-secret auction. He was playing directly to their pride, and it was working. But Lustig wasn't looking for the smartest man in the room, or even the richest. He scanned their faces, searching for something else. He was looking for the most insecure man. And then he saw him, a man named André Poisson. Poisson was a newcomer. He was desperate to be seen as a big shot in Paris. He wanted to make a name for himself, to prove he belonged with the elite. Lustig could smell that desperation. It was the perfect weakness. But there was a problem, a huge one. Poisson was interested, very interested. But his wife was not. She was smart. She kept asking questions. Why is this so secret? Why is a government official in such a hurry? The whole deal started to feel wrong to her. She told her husband it was a trap. For a moment, the entire plan hung by a thread. Poisson was getting cold feet. The greatest con in history was about to collapse. This is where true genius comes in. Sensing the deal was slipping away, Lustig played his final brilliant card. He arranged another private meeting with Poisson and acted worried. He confessed that, as a simple government worker, his salary was very small. He explained that for big, important deals like this, sometimes things needed a little push, a little grease to make the wheels of government turn smoothly. He wasn't asking for a bribe. He was just complaining about his life, letting Poisson fill in the blanks. The deal was done. Poisson handed over a massive bank draft for 7,000 tons of scrap metal. On top of that, he gave Lustig a huge cash bribe just to make sure the deal stayed his. Lustig and his partner didn't walk out of that hotel. They ran. With pockets stuffed full of cash, they jumped on the very next train to Vienna, Austria. They were rich, they were free, and they were laughing the entire way. Once in Vienna, they lived like absolute kings. They stayed in the fanciest hotels and ate the best food. But Victor Lustig had a nervous habit. Every single morning, he would obsessively buy all the French newspapers, his heart pounding as he scanned the headlines. He was waiting for the news to break, but the headlines never came. Days turned into weeks. Not a single word about a con man selling the Eiffel Tower. Why? Because André Poisson was so deeply embarrassed, so utterly humiliated to have been tricked, he never told a soul. He certainly never went to the police. He just swallowed his loss in silence. And this is where the story goes from legendary to just plain insane. Realizing he had gotten away with it completely, what do you think Victor Lustig did? He went back to Paris. Just a few months later, he checked into another fancy hotel, gathered a brand new group of scrap metal dealers, and using the exact same forged documents and the exact same story, he tried to sell the Eiffel Tower a second time. The nerve is just unbelievable. Selling a national landmark wasn't a once-in-a-lifetime scam for him. It was a business model he thought he could repeat. Who does that? This time, though, his plan hit a snag. The dealer he picked was a little more suspicious. Before any money changed hands, this man went straight to the police. But Lustig was a pro. He could smell danger. He felt the trap closing in and fled the country before anyone could catch him. So what does this unbelievable story tell us? It shows that sometimes the biggest, most ridiculous lies are the easiest to believe. The lie is so huge, so bold that people think, no one would ever have the nerve to make that up. The Eiffel Tower still stands today. It's a beautiful monument to French engineering and art, but it's also a quiet, hilarious reminder of the man who sold it. And it proves that sometimes the most powerful tool in the world isn't money or power. It's just pure, unshakable confidence. But selling a national landmark wasn't his only trick. Not even close. Victor Lustig once invented a machine he called the money box. It was a small, polished wooden box that he claimed could print perfect copies of $100 bills. What a ridiculous idea! Here's how the crazy scam worked. The box had a secret compartment that Lustig would load with a few real $100 bills. The machine had cranks and dials that did nothing. He would tell his victim the copying process was very slow, taking 6 hours to print a single bill. He'd demonstrate it, and 6 hours later, a crisp, real $100 bill would slide out. The mark, seeing this miracle, would beg to buy the box. Lustig would act hesitant, then finally agree to sell it for an enormous price, sometimes as much as $30,000. He made them feel lucky to get it. Of course, after the sale, the box would produce 1 or 2 more real bills from its hidden stash. Then, nothing but blank paper would come out. By the time the victim realized they'd bought a useless wooden box, Lustig was already in another city, living like a king on their money. But tricking greedy businessmen was one thing. Lustig then aimed higher at the most feared man in America. He decided to con the gangster Al Capone. This wasn't just bold, it was insane. He didn't try to sell Capone a box. He tried a con based on pure psychology. Lustig walked into Capone's office and asked for $50,000 for an investment, promising to double it in 2 months. Capone, intrigued by his nerve, gave him the money. The incredible part is what he did next. Nothing. He took Capone's $50,000 and just locked it in a safe deposit box. He didn't invest it. He didn't touch it. He just let it sit there for 2 months, waiting. Then, he returned to Capone's office with a long face. He apologized, saying the deal had fallen through. He handed back the entire $50,000. He played the part of an honest man who had failed. Capone was completely shocked. He was used to people trying to steal from him, not people returning his money. Impressed by Lustig's honesty, Capone handed him a reward. He gave him $5,000 just for being a trustworthy guy. Lustig walked away with a huge profit from a con that never even happened. This was his real genius. It was never just about the money, it was about the art of the trick. He even wrote down his own rules, the 10 commandments for a con artist. These were principles like be a patient listener and never look bored. He turned deception into a science. Ultimately, though, the game had to end. He wasn't caught for selling the Eiffel Tower or for tricking a gangster. He was finally arrested for a much simpler crime: counterfeiting money. The master of the Grand Con was brought down by a basic operation. He spent the last years of his life in the infamous Alcatraz prison.